thankful to have with me Dr. August Konkel, all the way from Southern Ontario. It's currently he's in Brantford right now.
That's right.
He's the former president of Providence Theological Seminary in Otterburne, Manitoba. And it was there I had a chance to sit in on a class with Dr. Konkel, and just an amazing Bible teacher, an amazing scholar. And I just learned so much. And I'm just so looking forward to this conversation, because we are going to be digging into the idea of interpretation and hermeneutics and just learning so much more about that. But he's currently right now the Old Testament professor of Old Testament. Am I right in saying that?
That's correct. That is correct. A professor of Old Testament.
Yeah, in McMaster.
At McMaster Divinity College,
yes,
which is in Hamilton.
Right.
So I commute to Hamilton in order to do my work. Now, of course, I do it quite a bit online.
Yeah. And it seems like it's gone in that direction now. People are just using so much online learning nowadays, and through calls like this and so on and so forth. I know I had done, like we were discussing earlier, that I think it was the one class I had done with you was the Book of Job, and that was through correspondence as well.
That was an online course, correct?
Yeah. That seems to be the new trend nowadays, right? Nobody is hardly sitting in classes anymore.
Well, students have found out that they can get credit for a course without having to move, and can do it from their own home. And so that's what they prefer. It's not what I prefer, but no, that's the way it is.
Well, to me, I'm like that too. Like, I'm old fashioned. I wish I could just sit down and talk to someone face to face. But this is, I guess this will have to do, right? And
this works.
It works. It still works.
It's not quite as much fun.
No.
If you and I were together across a desk sharing a cup of coffee, it would be more fun.
Absolutely, it would be. But like I said, I had the opportunity to sit in with Dr. Konkel on a lot of the classes, and
you didn't just sit in, Alec. You did a lot of work.
Yeah, I did. So, one of the things I was really impressed by, by learning from this wonderful man, is that I don't know if he's going to do it for us today, but one of the things I had discovered is that he's probably the only person that I know of that reads from the Hebrew text or the Greek text and recites it in English. And so then I discovered, man, I got a long ways to go. So I almost felt like that's all.
Well, learning to read a historical text is, of course, a little different than just learning a language that people speak. And so there's a way, Alec, in which you can read this text all your life, and because it's historical, you're interacting with a lot of issues in order to understand both what the author originally said, to whom he was speaking, and what has happened in all of the centuries, millennia, in the case of the Old Testament, that we have had in between. That's what raises our interpretive or hermeneutical questions.
Yeah, and that's primarily what we're going to be talking about in the next few minutes. But in dealing with theological matters, and there seems to be this real decline. And I'm just looking at some stats of the church today. This decline, or this awareness of and interest in theological matters amongst evangelicals in the church today.
Yes.
And it's really, because some people kind of just refuse to go in that direction simply from just sheer laziness or just a lack of interest, because they kind of feel like, well, theology isn't for me. It's just not important. Just as long as, I love God, I love people, go to church, say my prayers, pay my tithes, and so on and so forth, and just hold out until Jesus comes, or until we all get to heaven, kind of thing. But, there's just so much more in the Word of God that's at our disposal, that we can learn so much more from, to kind of give us a greater perspective on who God is and what the Word of God says. And so this is why I really believe, doctors, that theology matters.
Yes.
And I remember hearing this. And I remember hearing this one quote that we can all be theologians.
We are all theologians, but we can be better ones.
Better ones, absolutely. And but at the same time, people are kind of have this idea that, well, academics, biblical theology is just, they kind of see it as a mundane kind of thing. It's boring. It's not of interest to me. I would rather listen to somebody like some charismatic preacher on television. That seems to be more exciting to me than doing all this stuff, right? And sitting on a class and learning Hebrew, learning Greek, and all that stuff. But I don't know. Like, can you shed a little bit of light on that whole idea?
I first of all want to affirm everything that you have said. And I think one of the challenges that we have as Christians and as a Christian church and an evangelical church is that in very subtle ways, we tend to conform to our culture. So it's not just our church and the evangelical church that has moved away from actual serious thinking about issues.
Yes.
It's what we call postmodernism. It's kind of a feature of postmodernism. In modernism, there was this belief of a certain kind of knowledge. There are just things that I know and they can't be challenged. They're indisputable. But of course, in modernism, they were based on faulty premises because they were based on an idea of humans having the ability to attain all knowledge of everything, which includes God, by virtue of observation and by virtue of analysis. So what we call reasoning, rationalism, and experience, empiricism, the observations that we make around us, we can know everything that there is to know. Well, that broke down in my lifetime, especially in the late 70s. We started to have another kind of philosophy. In fact, it was a Canadian by the name of Jean-Francois Lyotard, who did a study of knowledge for the Ministry of Education in Quebec. And as this little book was a summary of this study which he did, in which he referred to the era that was coming as postmodernism. Now, what he meant by that was that the premises of certainty that modernism was based on were in fact not established. And so the result was that there were no real premises for knowledge. And we now live in a kind of a postmodern ethos where whatever I say is as valid and true as what anybody else says. And that's not just in theology, Alec. I'm experiencing it here. My daughter attended Brock University. That's in St. Catharines, a little bit down the road from me here. There was a scientist there, a biologist, who did a lifetime of work on scientific study, had it published in the most prestigious scientific journal in Germany, where it is reviewed by all sorts of other scientists say this is good scientific work. And it was printed. And then the activists didn't like the implications of it, so they just said it's not valid. And they actually withdrew the article and disciplined the professor for publishing the results of scientific research. You see, Alec, that's our ethos. And the problem is, as Christians, we've bought into that. I mean, we haven't exactly bought into it. We've slid into it.
Wow.
Without realizing what we're doing, we've become like everyone else around us. So why should I bother, fussing too much about translation and all that sort of thing? Whatever I think is as good as whatever anybody else thinks. And so the result is exactly what you have said, that we don't know what God has revealed about himself. We're really confident about our own opinions. Much too confident about our own opinions. and we actually have very little knowledge. So, Alec, I just want to affirm so much truly of what you have said, but just to remind us that we're always part of a bigger picture.
Absolutely.
And in this case, Jesus says, be in this world, but not of this world.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, we've slipped into, we're too much of this world.
We kind of missed it along the way there.
We missed it along the way.
Yeah,
that's right. And it's not even any one particular group. It's collectively as a society we've missed it. But then Christians in particular have missed it.
Yeah, and again, you know, as I was discussing earlier, the other gentleman before this, is that, you know, this is the whole reason why theology matters. And and having conversations like this, and going past, if I can say this without being misunderstood, is going outside the pages of the Word of God, and discovering like what was the first century church like? What was the culture? What was the context? What was the language? And you know, and those kinds of things. We kind of take the Word of God as is, and read it word for word in our English language, and kind of think of it through our 21st North American Western lenses.
That's it.
And,
precisely.
And that's where we start to go into all kinds of trouble, get into all kinds of confusion, and say, well, John, Matthew, Mark, Paul, all these guys were thinking of an audience 2020 years from now. You know?
That's right.
And those are the kind of problems we can run into if we're not careful, right?
Oh, those are the things that lead us to falsely think that we actually understand something when in fact we don't understand it nearly as truly as we should. You, first of all, concerning its importance, let me say this. You probably heard me say in class, because I repeat it quite often, there is nothing that's going to be more important in anyone's life than their understanding of God. Because our understanding of God, even if we believe he doesn't exist, this understanding shapes everything we do. And as Christians, our understanding of who God is and how God works and what he does shapes our decisions. It shapes the way we live. It shapes our values and the way that we think. And how do we come to this understanding of God? Well, there's only one way that we can do it, because God must reveal himself to us. We have no capacity to understand the holy. You know, God is the creator of time and space and knowledge that we have. God has created all of these things. How do we think that we have the capacity to understand who this creator is? He must reveal himself to us, which he has done through human means. And that's very important too, because if God didn't do it through human means, what use would it be to us? we're human. But when it is through human means, then we have to make the effort to understand that means through which it comes. Now, let me come back to the point you made here, Alec, so very clearly and so well, that the words of the New Testament or the words of the Old Testament are, first of all, in another language. That creates a lot more challenges than most of us realize. Language is a complex thing. It's not that it can't be understood across languages, but it's not simple. But besides language, what you said here, Alec, was a profound hermeneutical theological truth. These words themselves have a context that is not our own. And all words carry their meaning within a context at different levels, within the context of the sentence, within the context of the paragraph, within the context of the book, within the context of just what you said. To who was this written?
Yes.
And what was their world? And what was being communicated to them? We aren't going to understand this revelation until we actually do some work to go back and discover what these questions are. And there's too few of us. Alec, you were rare. Our classes were small. You took the time to come out there and say, I'm going to do what I can to find out what this world of Jesus was and who he was speaking to and how his words communicated and told us truth about God. You took the time to sit down, write papers, think, and do that.
Yes.
Most Christians are satisfied to have devotions. There's nothing wrong with having devotions.
No.
That's good.
Yeah.
But just because I read the Beatitudes from Matthew chapter 5 and it blesses me, doesn't mean that I understand what Jesus was teaching. Those are two different things. That's what you know. And that's why you're here on this interview. Yeah. Because you want other people to understand they need to do a little bit of what you did. Maybe they can't come to a classroom, but they can do something.
Yeah.
And that we're obligated to do.
Yeah. And you may not be able to get it all. Like we think
none of us can ever get it all, Alec.
Yeah, because you think about the vastness of God and the pages of the Word of God is just so much in there. Like it's the living Word. And people, I think now again, I'm trying not to say things that will be misunderstood, but we can kind of over spiritualize, when it comes to reading the Word of God.
Yeah.
And so in my mind, I'm thinking, yes, it's just black and white. It's paper, leather binding kind of thing. But yet at the same time, there were people that took the time to write Hebrew, Greek, and all these different writers. Think of it in light of your intellect, of your mind, which we have been so graciously given by God to use. Yeah. And I like to think of it this way: you either use it or you lose it.
Yes,
absolutely. Because I love the whole aspect of learning. And so, Dr. Konkel, if for the next few minutes, thinking in terms of biblical interpretation, most people may not be too familiar with these kinds of terms, especially the idea of hermeneutics. Can you kind of just briefly highlight like what it means? Like, what is hermeneutics?
Really, what we mean by the subject is that we attempt to understand how language conveys ideas and to understand it clearly and correctly. Now, we do this all the time in our daily lives, but most of the time in our own situation, we are quite capable of doing this spontaneously and having a pretty good idea what somebody else meant to say. Though once in a while, even in our daily life, we get confused because we use a word in a way that gets misunderstood. and sometimes it's funny, sometimes an argument breaks out. All kinds of things can happen. That's the breakdown of the hermeneutical process, even in a conversation.
Yeah.
Now, as soon as we go a step further and we're reading a book, well, if we're reading a book written in our time and in our language and in our world, we probably, again, don't need to spend much effort in trying to understand that book. But supposing that I want to read a book that was written by a native on a reservation in their language. Well, how would I begin to understand that? And Alec, if you knew that language, do you speak Cree? Is it Cree that you speak?
I'm Ojibwe, but I don't.
Ojibwe.
I don't speak it. I do understand if someone talks, but as far as speaking the actual language, I know some words here and there.
Can you read it?
No.
Okay. No. But supposing it was Ojibwe, that's a different language than Cree, I take it.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Some similarities, but Not a whole lot. Yeah.
My friend Howard Jolly and some of the others, they speak Cree. So
Oh,
if I
yeah.
use that
I
as
know
an example,
Howard,
and then they know Cree very, very well. So say Howard comes from near James Bay in a place called Moose Factory.
Yep.
So if Howard were to write something in Cree about his growing up life in Moose Factory, how would I begin to understand that? And if Howard translated the Cree into English, would I always know what he is talking about? He would start talking about fish or water or hunting or snow, all sorts of things. I wouldn't know what he meant because I've never lived there. I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
So what do I need to do? Well, I can find out. I can come to understand it, but I got to do some hermeneutics, don't I?
Yeah. Absolutely.
I got to go back there and I got to figure out, okay, what does Howard mean when he talks about this snow or this fish or this or this weather or whatever? Well, that's what we mean by hermeneutics. It's to understand what someone in another time and place, and very often in another language, is saying. Absolutely. And that takes hard work in different steps.
Now, I did hear. I kind of read up on it a little bit, and I may have heard it said that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there is somewhat of a difference between interpretation and hermeneutics. Am I correct? Am I correct in saying that?
Well, hermeneutics is probably a little bit more comprehensive a word, Alec. Hermeneutics refers, and it's a theological word. So it brings with it different senses. No two words are ever fully synonymous. They're always distinct in some ways, but they sometimes can be used interchangeably, and then we call that use synonymous. So I can sometimes use the word hermeneutics and not mean anything different than I would use with interpretation. But yes, the two words mean different things. So hermeneutics is comprehensive. It refers to when we use the word, we use it in a theological context. And so when we use the word, hermeneutics refers to understanding the scriptures in particular, which for us are the Hebrew and the Aramaic of the Old Testament and the Greek of the New Testament, and their worlds and what they're about. For us, that's what hermeneutics means. Interpretation means, do I understand this sentence? Do I understand what this person said? So I can use the word between us. Oh, am I interpreting you correctly? In other words, do I hear you correctly? I wouldn't say, am I hermeneuting you correctly? Because I'm asking about something very specific.
Right, yeah.
What are you saying? So when I use the word interpretation, it usually would refer to a specific passage or a specific writing. And it needn't even be the Bible. It could be anything that I'm trying to interpret. I could be trying to interpret French if I was, in Quebec City. I wouldn't be doing hermeneutics there. I would just be interpreting. Hermeneutics is understanding a whole other world and a whole other time and place where things are written. It's a much broader, much more inclusive term. That's why we use it. Some people mock it. They say, Herman who? Just make it plain and simple and say interpretation. Well, no, it's not just interpretation.
No.
So you're right.
No, yeah, and I completely understand, and I want to just make that clear, because when we think about all of these fancy theological terms, it almost like we kind of shut the door on these ideas because if I don't understand it, then I'm not interested, kind of thing. And so, but we like to use the terms like interpretation, right? So I want to be able to understand it through properly interpreting it.
That's right.
Like you said, that hermeneutics is entirely different. Is almost an entirely different thing, because
it's an entirely different thing in the sense that many, many more factors are involved in doing hermeneutics. May I just make a comment? If we don't understand it, we're not interested. That's true. That's always true. The assumption, though, which is what you're concerned about here, and that's why I want to address this. the assumption is that if I can't understand it, it doesn't matter. You know, that's somebody else doing their. No, actually, just because I don't understand it does not mean that it doesn't matter. Maybe it means I should find out what this is, because understanding it does matter, and that's precisely your concern. Yeah. So your concern as a Christian, Alec, and this is the whole thing you've been addressing here, is not just interpretation, because I can interpret John 3:16 properly, but that doesn't mean that I understand what it takes to know God's revelation. God's revelation is not just John 3:16, as much as that's a very important truth. Knowing how to relate to God in my life in this world is more than this passage, that passage, or that passage. God gave us the whole of Revelation, and that, Alec, takes hermeneutics to begin to understand what we need to know about God, so we can make decisions as we should, so we can have the values that we should have. God, it just so bothers me that we use the word God without ever thinking very much about what it actually means. And in conversations, and especially in conversations with Christians who don't do hermeneutics, whenever they use the word God, I always say, I wonder what they mean. And what they mean makes all the difference in the world.
It's like,
and sometimes I figure out what they mean, and it doesn't have anything to do with the God of Revelation, because they didn't do their hermeneutics.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting you say that, because I read a passage, and I remember hearing this, that I believe it's in Deuteronomy. And here's Moses standing before the children of Israel saying, the Lord our God is one God.
Yes. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse.
Yeah. And so how I understood
Israel,
it.
Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Yeah.
That's
the Lord our God
you just
is
quoted.
one God. So it was almost like they were, and I remember hearing it put this way, is that they were almost in shock when they heard that term, one God, because they understood that in that period of time that, well, there were so many gods, because they were in Egypt because there was this God, there was that God, and that God. And so for them to fully grasp the idea, it was almost like they could not handle the thought or the idea that there was just one God.
Yes.
And so,
and it's profound. It's profound. You know, we've been dealing a lot with COVID these days. and it's caused, I don't know, well, if I'm hearing anything about Saskatchewan correct, it's a little like it is over here. It's caused a lot of disagreements over what one should be forced to do and what one should not be forced to do. And it got me back to thinking of the Donatists. These were Christians in the area of in the time of Diocletian and the worst of the Roman persecutions. And the Christians were being killed by the mobs. You know, it wasn't the emperor, it was the mobs of the people and their understanding of the gods. And of course, for them, it was, you know, the stars and all of these other powers. And when Christians insisted on a God that wasn't the stars and that wasn't their gods, they couldn't handle it. They had God, they had gods. But these people who had God, they threw them to the lions, literally, because they couldn't accept them having this different idea. That's how profound is the verse you just quoted. This is 400 years after the time of Jesus. And the mobs of people, those outside of the Hebrew and the Christian faith, cannot understand that concept. And in fact, they find it so revolting they kill these people. Now, saying that God is one God is just the starting point for what we mean by God. A critical starting point, spoken by Moses more than 1,000 years before Christ, but not understood, sometimes not understood right till this day.
Mm-hmm.
We don't understand what that means.
Yep.
It takes hermeneutics.
Yep. And, dealing with the idea of even just saying the actual word God, we can run in all kinds of different directions when we say God, because people will start to ask questions like, okay, well, which God exactly?
Yeah.
And
sure.
So that's why
let me just elaborate that very true point.
Yeah, sure.
The Hebrews had a word for God, El or Elohim.
Yep.
Now that was precisely what you just said. Which God? You know, what do you mean when you say Elohim? What do you mean when you say El? That could be any deity or power outside of humanity. It's just all open. You don't know what you mean. A lot of people use the word God in that way. Mm-hmm. It's just some kind of power outside of humanity, and who knows what that is. When the Hebrews said, Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, they actually used something much more specific than God. The Hebrew word is Yahweh Eloheinu. Yahweh, our God. So they weren't just using the term God, they were saying, this is God who revealed himself to Moses at Mount Sinai. And we call him Yahweh, which means he is with us. We translate it as I am who I am in the book of Exodus. I am what? Well, in the book of Exodus, there's two very important things. I am with you and I am merciful. They both are revealed at Mount Sinai, but they both say some very specific things about Yahweh as opposed to all the other gods.
Yep.
Now, to say I am with you, that needs hermeneutics and interpretation. Because, Alec, when you and I are with each other, that's one thing.
Yep.
But what does it mean when the Holy says he is with you, and when the heaven of heavens, as Solomon says, can't contain him? What does it mean for him to be with you? The Israelites spent centuries of time trying to learn that, and they sometimes paid a very heavy price, namely death, because they didn't understand what it meant for God to be with them. Can I divert on one more hermeneutical point? Emmanuel, God is with us. Now, we always think, oh, Emmanuel, God is with us. That's a good thing. Well, in Isaiah, for the king Ahaz, Emmanuel, God is with him, was not a good thing. Isaiah says in chapter 8 very specifically, when God is with you, Ahaz, it's death, it's judgment. That's what it means for God to be with you, because you've rejected God's sign, you've rejected trust in God, and you've trusted in something else, and God will be with you. But that's not a good thing. That's death. So
you just pressed the whole idea of Christmas right there.
That's Christmas is coming. It's always a shock to me that every time I turn around, Christmas is coming again. And here we are past Halloween and Christmas is coming. And for us as Christians, Emmanuel is wonderful good news indeed. For you and I, Alec, God with us, we know what that means. But there's all manner of people here at Christmas who are going to be, some of them are going to be talking about God being with them. And it won't be any different for them than it was for Ahaz, because they have no idea what it means to trust God, and they don't understand how they've betrayed God, and they don't realize that for God being with them would be as it was for God being with Ahaz. There's hermeneutics
yes,
at work.
and that's so interesting because we take terms like that, Emmanuel, God with us, so we automatically think, well, he's going to be with us, and nothing bad is going to happen to us.
That's right.
He's going to be our shield, our protector, and all of that. But what else comes with God? Like what you said, it might mean death. It might mean, judgment, correction, and stuff like that, right? Like a good
which is why the wise man has another word.
Yeah.
The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Mm-hmm. And you just put your finger on it right there. If God is going to be with me, maybe I should be afraid. Yes. Because what if I'm Ahaz?
Yeah.
That's not such a good thing.
That's so amazing. Just as we were talking, Doctor, is that you see, the reason why I said that is because see, a lot of us, we know what we believe. Like we believe the confirmation, we believe a statement of faith, our values, and our denomination, our statement of faith, and all that stuff. But not everybody tends to question, well, why? Why do I believe this? Why do I believe the statement of faith? Why do I believe in this passage, this verse?
Yeah.
And the other question is, well, if I'm going to understand the what, I got to understand the why and the how.
Yeah.
How am I going to view this verse? How am I going to dig deeper into it? Could you highlight a little bit about that?
Sure. The why question comes under a subject related to hermeneutics. We sometimes call it apologetics, but it means I really have to have a foundation to my thinking.
Yes.
And I want to say that I work at McMaster University. The Divinity College is right on McMaster University. And I want to tell you that university students have never asked the question, why? Why do I believe this? I was in a debate. I was invited to be in a debate with a group of, it was sponsored by a group of Muslims. They wanted to present the Muslim faith to the university community. They invited a imam out from Toronto, and then they wanted a Christian viewpoint, and then they had a humanist or atheist viewpoint. Mm-hmm. And of course, I wasn't, what I was interested in, especially, was challenging everyone with the question of why. I said, you have to live by faith because there's something that you trust.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about why you trust that? Nobody in the university thinks about why. I think the Lord was at work during that session, because the atheists afterwards shook my hand, and actually the university students, most of them went out rather silently, because they were confronted with the why question.
Yes.
They believe all sorts of things, never stop to think about it. Well, then once you've said why, this is why I believe this, you're absolutely right. Okay, so what is it I actually believe? And that's what we were talking about. So even if I say God is one or God is with me, well, what is it that I actually believe? We haven't thought about that either.
No.
We just assume, it means, as you said, if God is with me, everything's going to be good. Well, no, Job found out God was with him. And in fact, Job said, and you took the course, Alec, Job said it this way, God is with me a little bit too much. I can't even spit without God seeing me, and then he jabs me again with another pain. This God being with me, for Job, that wasn't such a good thing. He didn't have any doubt that God was with him, and he didn't have any doubt about why he believed in God. He had all those things down very good. But this whole business of presence, God being with me, not such a good thing. And then Job's question, and our question is, okay, then how? If I know why I believe this, and I know what I believe, what does it mean to fear God as the beginning of wisdom? That was Job's question.
Yeah.
God, how do I deal with my life? You know, Job never doubted, and he understood well the why of his belief. He understood well the what of his belief. He knew who God was, and he knew God was just, and he knew God was good. These things he couldn't question.
Yeah.
But how?
How?
How do I understand my life? How do I trust God in this situation? That's exactly the hermeneutical issues. Why, what, how? You've said it so well, Alec. You said it so well. Let me thank you for asking that.
No, and that's really important, you know, and like I said, you know, the entire Christian community is really in a place right now where there's a decline in
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
in theological matters.
And not only the Christian community, really all of this whole business of rights and activism and everything else, you know, it's taken us off the rails.
Yes.
And it's going to lead us into it has led us into terrible conflict, because we've all gotten away from actually stopping to think rationally and think hermeneutically. But Christians should be ashamed of it. And most of the time we don't even know it.
I'm going back to the idea of, you know, almost at the time of the temptation of Eve and the serpent. And of course, the husband was standing right there, and I don't understand why he didn't interject when he did, when he could have. But even just saying that very, 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 very thing was, you can be just like God.
You can be your own God.
You can be your own God. In other words, you were saying, and you can highlight on this few more minutes that we have here, is that you can have the right to say what is right or what is wrong in your own
Alec, life. You are one of the very few and rare people I encounter who've done some hermeneutics of Genesis chapter 3. You understand it. You got it. But see, you went to some work to do that, but you got it. Yes, you have the right to say what is right and what is wrong. That's precisely what it's about. Sorry, I interrupted. I'm dangerous that way.
No, and that's all part of this whole package of theology, hermeneutics, interpretation, and understanding culture, understanding language. I really wanted to get more into the idea of language itself. Perhaps maybe we can do a part 2 of this.
Maybe we could do a part 2. Sure, we can. I just love talking about language, and you remember hermeneutics and the way that I emphasized words don't have meaning. Words are used to convey meaning. We can create meaning with words, but a word, bar, what does that word mean? Well, it could be something I eat. It could be a place where I go to eat. It could be a place where I meet a lawyer and he acts on my behalf. What is this word, bar? That's language. We can talk about that. I'd love to talk about language.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, for sure, I would love to have a second interview, maybe in the future, and we can talk more about language.
Sure, we can do that, Alec.
Yeah. Unfortunately, you know, I know that we can probably talk for a few more hours, but just so we got
there's always people say I'm long-winded. Alec, I may be long, but I'm never winded.
Yeah. No, I've been absolutely enjoying this conversation, and hopefully, you know, that we can again, you know, set another time in the future and have more discussions like this, because, you know, like I said to my last guest, is that, you know, this is the whole reason why theology matters, and it should matter to any person, regardless of your state in life, whether which denomination or statement of faith or belief. You know, theology should matter to you as a believer in Christ.
That's right. It does matter, but the problem is it doesn't matter to us. Should.
Yes.
Correct. Correct. It really does matter, but when it doesn't matter to us, there's a problem.
Yeah. Again, a whole different type of discussion right there. It could lead us in a whole different direction.
We could take a whole lot about the sociology of the Christian life. Yep, absolutely.
Well, we got to cut it short there. Dr. Konkel, thank you so much for coming on board. I just really appreciate your insight, your wisdom, and your knowledge. And again, I look forward to further discussions with you. And I hope to see you again at some point. And
look forward to your email, Alec. And as soon as I get your email, this is one of the positive aspects of this online stuff. This is a way that I get to see you in they call it a virtual sense. It doesn't seem very virtual to me, because I don't even know what kind of room you're in. So it's not very virtual, but it's still you and it's your voice and I can recognize you. So I'll wait for your email and we'll do this again.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't really have an office set up nowadays. So this is just my living room background.
Yeah, well, I don't have much of an office either. It's especially right now, we've got a water leak in our basement. So things are scattered around here.
Yeah.
But you know what? The office is between your ears.
Yeah.
And that office is working pretty good.
It works pretty good. That's what we have, right? Well, anyways, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to thank you for listening today, and hopefully you can like this, you comment, share it with your friends and your family, share it with your pastors or your leaders, and it's conversations like this that allow us to grow and to understand the things of God more, and to allow us to go deeper. So I thank you for joining us today, and our guest today, Dr. Konkel. I really would encourage you to locate this man of God. I'm sure he has some material out there that's available at your disposal, and take advantage of it. And McMaster University. Could you maybe just take a minute and just share a little bit of information about?
Sure. I work at McMaster Divinity College. That's a theological college that is been founded by the Baptist Church, the Convention Baptists, as we call them down here. I think Union Baptists, maybe what you call them more out west, but we are the seminary that represents that denomination, and we founded back in the 19th century, we founded McMaster University. So the university came from the college. We separated from the university in a formal sense in 1957, because the university was now becoming a world famous organization. And if you do pay attention to health reports, we are really one of the health centers of Canada, and McMaster University would like to say one of the health centers of the world. A lot of leading research in the area of health. Very famous university, actually. Our building is a little corner on the side of the university, where our library is the university library. So we have some real advantages for students that come to study here, because they really have the resources of the entire university at their disposal, but they have the focused theological, hermeneutical opportunity at our Divinity College, which is very different than religious studies in the university. Religious studies, the McMaster University has religious studies. That's not the same thing.
No.
What you're interested in here is knowing God.
Yes.
Theology, hermeneutics. That's what we do.
Yes, sir. And that's McMaster Divinity College.
That's McMaster Divinity College. And it is a part of McMaster University, but it does operate independently of the university.
Yes, and that's Hamilton, Ontario.
Hamilton, Ontario. Yes, Toronto would like to swallow us up, and they would like to just say we're part of the Greater Toronto Area, the GTA. But we have our Tiger Cats. We may lose to the Rough Riders every single time, but we still have our Tiger Cats, and we're Hamilton.
Right on. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're just about out of time. And again, I just want to thank my guest, Dr. Konkel, for just talking to us and just explaining some things that we may have even had questions about. And like I said, I'm looking forward for more conversations. And so thankful that you're able to join us. And once again, thank you, Dr. Konkel.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm already looking forward to our next meeting.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
God bless you.